Hello everyone. Welcome back. In this session we are going to learn one of the most important concepts of ES6, that is asynchronous scripts. So in this aspect we will first look into what is traditional callbacks function. What is the problem with traditional callbacks? How to avoid traditional callbacks? Using promises, then we will look into async and await concept, which is introduced in ES 2017. We will also look into how to handle error in async code. So let's start with a demo of callbacks function, then we will discuss about problem of callbacks functions. So I am going to create a folder called 08 asynchronous scripts demo, then I will add a file called 01 traditional callbacks.js. Now let's write the code. I am defining a function called fetchData that takes a single parameter named callback. This parameter is expected to be a function that will be executed after the asynchronous operation completes. Now, I am adding a simulated asynchronous operation using setTimeout. Inside setTimeout, I am providing a delay of 1000 milliseconds, and after the delay, I am calling the callback function with the string data received. Next, I am invoking the fetchData function. I am passing an anonymous arrow function as the argument to fetchData. This function accepts a parameter named data, which will hold the value passed by the callback function inside fetchData. Finally, when the setTimeout delay completes, the callback function executes, passing the string data received to the anonymous function. This anonymous function logs the received data to the console using console.log data. Now let's discuss about problem with this way of writing callbacks function. Traditional callbacks can lead to callback hell, where callbacks are nested within other callbacks, making the code difficult to read and maintain. Avoiding traditional callbacks involves using modern JavaScript features like promises and async/await to handle asynchronous operations more cleanly. So now let's look into the demo how we can write the same code using Promise Framework. So for that I will create a file called 02promisedemo.js. Now let's write the code. In this code, I am going to demonstrate how to use JavaScript promises to handle asynchronous operations more cleanly compared to traditional callbacks. The fetchData function is defined to return a new promise. A promise is an object representing the eventual completion or failure of an asynchronous operation. The promise constructor takes a function with two parameters, resolve and reject. These parameters are functions that you call to either resolve the promise with a value or reject it with an error. Inside the promise, the setTimeout function is used to simulate an asynchronous operation that takes 1000 milliseconds, 1 second, to complete. After the delay, the resolve function is called with the string data received, indicating that the operation was successful and providing the result. The fetchData function is then called, and the returned promise is handled using the then and catch methods. The then method is used to specify a callback function that will be executed when the promise is resolved successfully. In this case, the callback function takes one parameter, data, and logs it to the console using console.log data. The catch method is used to specify a callback function that will be executed if the promise is rejected. The provided callback function takes one parameter, error, and logs it to the console using console.error error. This ensures that any errors encountered during the asynchronous operation are properly logged, aiding in debugging and error handling. So guys, the key point over here is promises are a modern way to handle asynchronous operations in JavaScript. A promise represents a value that may be available now, or in the future, or never. Promises provide methods like .then, .catch, and .finally to handle the eventual completion or failure of an asynchronous operation. Now let's proceed further and look into how to simplify asynchronous scripts. Simplifying asynchronous scripts involves using modern JavaScript features to make asynchronous code easier to write and understand. This includes using promises and async/await to avoid deeply nested callbacks and make the flow of asynchronous operations more linear and readable. Using async and await. So to do that, I am creating a file called simplifyingasynchronousscripts.js file. Now let's write the code. In this code, I am going to demonstrate the use of JavaScript's async and await syntax to handle asynchronous operations in a more straightforward and readable manner compared to traditional callbacks, or promises alone. The fetchData function is defined to return a new promise. This promise simulates an asynchronous operation using setTimeout, which delays the execution of the resolve function by 1000 milliseconds, 1 second. When the delay elapses, the resolve function is called with the string data received, indicating that the operation was successful and providing the result. The getData function is an async function, which allows the use of the await keyword inside its body. The await keyword pauses the execution of the getData function until the promise returned by fetchData is resolved. This makes the asynchronous code appear more like synchronous code, improving readability. Inside the getData function, a try/catch block is used to handle potential errors. The await fetchData expression waits for the promise returned by fetchData to resolve and assigns the resolved value to the data variable. If the promise is resolved successfully, the data is logged to the console using console.log data. If an error occurs and the promise is rejected, the catch block catches the error and logs it to the console using console.error. Finally, the getData function is called to initiate the asynchronous operation. This code snippet effectively demonstrates how async and await can simplify the handling of asynchronous operations, making the code easier to read and maintain. Now let's observe the async and await code. Async and await is syntactic sugar built on top of promises, introduced in ES 2017. It allows you to write asynchronous code that looks synchronous, making it easier to read and understand. The async keyword is used to declare an asynchronous function, and the await keyword is used to pause the execution of the function until a promise is resolved. And you will notice here without async and await we have to use the chaining to handle asynchronous call. Next, now let's observe the error handling in async code. Error handling in asynchronous code is crucial to ensure that your application can gracefully handle failures. With promises, you can use the .catch method to handle errors. With async/await, you can use try/catch blocks to handle errors in a more synchronous looking manner. So guys, we are done with this session. In the next session, we will learn about higher order functions. So on this note, I am stopping over here. See you in the next session.